So the first speaker will be Professor Terry Lam, who will talk about neighborhood built environment and late life depression, a multi-level past analysis in Chinese society. So Professor Lam is the Harry G. Liang Professor in Social Work and Social Administration at the University of Hong Kong. His research interests focus on long-term care, productive aging, geriatric mental health, and social capital. He is an advisor to the Hong Kong government on long-term care policies. He is an invited member of 2 WHO committees on healthy aging and long-term care. Before joining the Hong Kong University, he was a tenured professor at the University of Minnesota. He was elected as the fellow of the Gerontological Society of America in 2011 and was awarded the Career Leadership Award by the Association of Gerontology Education in Social Work in 2016. Professor Lam is an editor of the Journal of Aging and Mental Health. Okay, over to you, Professor Lam.
Okay, so I think right now you saw my screen. So the first one is the topic I am presenting actually is a paper that just published online early this year. So in case if you really want to take a very detailed look at the methodology as well as major findings, please do you can either go to the GSA, I mean the Journal of Gerontology Social Sciences website, or if you are interested, you can ask me. I can send you a copy of that article. But I know, because I know it is not available free of charge, it is not open access. But still, your institution may already have a copy of the article. If not, you can contact me. So today I am not going to very detail of the methodology, nitty-gritty of the study. Instead, I want to tell more about the background, the major finding, and the implication. So basically, this is interesting article. But before I do my presentation, let me give credit of all the people on the team. So it is a collaboration between the Southport Center on Aging as well as the urban planning at HKU. So we have people who are social scientists. We also have a human geographer as well as urban planning researcher who are on the research team. So the people on the top are the people from the Southport Center, and then here are the people from the urban planning, including Professor Chris Whisper, who is a dean of architecture and urban planning at HKU, and Professor Rebecca Chiu, who is the head of department of urban planning at HKU. So it is a really fun project to be able to work across discipline. Another one I want to acknowledge the funding. The project was supported by the grants from the Hong Kong Housing Society, and the study has been approved by the Human Research Ethics Committee of the HKU. So let me go back to the topic. So basically, we know quite a lot about depression in old age. Particularly, you may know I am the editor of the journal Aging and Mental Health. So I read a lot, really a lot of articles on aging and mental health and on depression. So we earlier study identify a group of risk factors for late life depression. However, most of them are focusing on individual level factor, how much support you have, as well as some lived experience, other biomedical stuff. Very little study have really considered the potential impact of neighborhood environment on late life depression. However, we also know that, for example, if you are familiar with the healthy aging, the new healthy aging framework of the WHO, so basically what the healthy aging is related, it is not about fear of disease, but it is about maintaining your functional capacity, to do or to be, something that you have reason to value. And then when we talk about the functional capacity, we look into two factors. One is the intrinsic capacity, which is something you are inborn or inside your body, and then as well as the environment. So in healthy aging framework, environment is one of the three major factors, for healthy aging. But when we study late life depression or mental health at old age, we seldom really pay attention on how environment affects mental wellness. So environment may have, long-term effects on mental wellness. Particularly, a lot of time, older people stay in the environment for a long time. For example, in my study, I collect sample from public housing estate. So typically, these people, they move into the public housing estate when they are young family, and they stay there for 30, 40 to 50 years. So they age in that environment. So the physical environment over time will have a profound impact on their well-being. Second one is as they age, their functional capacity may decline. So the environment may be able to enable them or may be able to compensate them in terms of keeping their functional capacity. So functional capacity can be both physical as well as mental, including psychosocial. So if you look at the ecological theory of aging, pretty much we argue that the older adults are particularly affected by their immediate environment, mainly because they are not that mobile and they need to fulfill their daily needs from their immediate environment, particularly for low-income older people. So if you are upper middle class or upper class, your area, your living space will be much bigger. So for example, you can move from one district to another district for healthcare or for grocery shopping. But if you are low income older adults, most likely you will seek medical advice from a physician right next to, close to where you live. Similarly, you may buy grocery, you may do exercise in the area quite next to your apartment. So for low-income older people, they are particularly more vulnerable to the environment, the impact of environment to their well-being. So with this argument, so we start asking ourselves, how much do we know on the impact of environment, to mental wellness? So we select depression as our first target. So we look into how environment affect the depression. So when we talk about environment, basically right now we're focusing on built environment. So at this point, we do not focus that much on the natural environment. So when we talk about built environment, that means they are talking about the high-rise building, the park, the road network, the commercial area. So with the understanding of the ecological theory on aging, so it is imperative for us to understand the association between built environment and the well-being of older people, particularly those who are frail and mentally unwell. So because they are more bounded by their immediate environment. For people who are much stronger, not frail, or people who are mentally well, as well as people who have resources, as I think, their environment can be much bigger. They can tap on resources from bigger environment. So we a couple of years ago, we started a new research line on what we call environmental gerontology. So we basically start from an age-friendly project in Hong Kong that we get funding from the Hong Kong Jockey Club charity, and we help all the 18 districts in Hong Kong to kind of move toward age-friendly. So it is a bottom-up process to really look into how environment, age-friendliness affects the well-being of older people. So building from that funding as well as that knowledge base, we kind of spin off a research team to focusing on environmental gerontology. However, we look at the existing literature or evidence regarding the impact of built environment on older people's mental health. The evidence are quite inconclusive. So basically, this is the framework we are trying to look into. So we look into the environment. So we have two levels. One level is the process, the well-being itself. The other level is the environment. When we look at the level 2, the environment, we look into several factors: densities, design, diversity, and destination. So in the article, we have quite detailed explanation on what each of these term really refer to, as well as how we measure it. But at the same time, we look into two processes. One is the compensatory process. One is enabling process. So the major argument is if your functional ability decline, you go through a compensatory process. You use the environment to compensate the decline in functional ability so that you can maintain good functioning, both physical as well as mental. So in this study, we focus on mental well-being. At the same time, environment itself can help us to build our capacity. So it can enable capacity enhancing behavior so that we can kind of, through the enabling process, we can maintain the well-being. So we look into these two processes, how the, we hypothesize the way the environment affects our well-being of older people are either through the enabling or compensatory process or both. So this is basically what we are trying to study in here. So we have two research questions, very simple. The first one is how the built environment associated with late life, depression. The second one is do the enabling and compensatory processes mediate the effects of built environment and late life depression. So we really look into the whole process here. Does the built environment through the compensatory process enable better mental wellness, or through that enabling process or through the compensatory process? So this is something we try to understand a little bit more. So without going a lot into the detail about the background and the theoretical framework, let me talk a little bit about the sample. So basically, this is a very interesting study. So we collect 4-year longitudinal data from a little bit more than 2,000 people living in 12 public housing estates. So we do probability sampling in each of the samples. So we kind of classify the older people into 3 age groups, 65 to 74, and then 75 to 84, and 85 and older. And then we sample them based on, we oversample the oldest people, but then we do weight adjustment so that we can kind of make the sample, bring the sample back closer to the census, population. And then we have 4-year follow-up with them. So we start with 2,000, a little bit more than 2,000 people. And then each year we come back to them. So at the end of the study, we still have about 1,200 people in the study sample. And then we look into every single cases that we miss. We look into why they are missing data. So basically, many of them pass away because we oversample 85 years old. So after 4 years, some of them pass away. Some of them cannot participate in the survey, mainly because of healthcare reasons. For example, they admitted to a hospital while during the survey period, or they were admitted to the nursing home and they moved out from the public housing estate. We do have a very small number of people who were unwilling to participate in the study again. So in this study, actually, we look into we are using the cross-sectional component of the data. In other studies, we also publish, we look into the longitudinal component of the data. So the first data collection was in the summer of 2014, and then we come back to them each year. And then we train our own interviewers to conduct the study. And then since we work with the public housing authority in Hong Kong, so we also obtain the detailed address of each individual housing, because in Hong Kong, the building, a high-rise building, in each address we have usually about 300 households in that building. So there is not much confidentiality issue, because we won't be able to, even with that address, we won't be able to identify out of the 300 households, which household we have sampled. So we know exactly the address of that people. In fact, we also, for some confidential data, we also able to know which floor they are in and which direction they are in, whether they are looking at the mountain or they are looking at the highway. So we know exactly the environmental information from the address. And then we work with the urban planning people. So we develop a whole network based on the urban planning data. So I skip all those because of time. So I think I will skip all the detail on the urban planning data. But if you are interested, please do read that paper. So we have some measurement, for the physical activities, social activities, as well as functioning. So these are some basic information. So for functioning, we use the IEDL to measure the functioning. And then we control for age, for gender, for marital status, for education, for chronic disease, for connection. And for connection, we measure by Mocha. So we have another paper accepted for publication, which looked into how environment affects connection over time. So we are using 4 years longitudinal data for that paper. And then some people may argue, there may be some selection effect. For example, people, because when they become more frail, they select the environment they are in. So they move to an environment to accommodate their frailty. But in fact, for our population, most of them are living in the same apartment for more than 30 years. So they move in when they are really young. So the impact will be more from the environment to the well-being, to the functioning, rather than because of the change in functioning, they change the environment. So that was one of the critique we have when we submit the paper for review. But then we told them that if you look, we have exactly how long for each person, we have exactly how long they have been living in the same address. So on average, it is about 30 years. So we use SEM, structural equation modeling, multi-level, to do the analysis. And then so let me just very briefly share that the major findings. So I skipped the tables on the finding. Maybe I can put the paper on the chat room later today, so that you can download the paper from the chat room. So these are a very brief summary of the finding. The first, by the way, we also look, for the environmental data, we use both 200 meter buffer as well as 500 meter buffer study. So the reason for 500 meter is for older people in Hong Kong, the typical mode of traffic or transportation to meet the daily life is by foot. So 500 meter diameters or buffer is the area, the zone most older people will feel comfortable walking around, to meet their daily life. But for more frail people, the 500 meter buffer is too large for them. So we also use 200 meter buffer. So we use both 200 and 500 meter buffer. So in terms of environment, we found more urban greenness with both 200 and 500 buffer, as well as more commercial facility within 500 meter buffer are directly associated with fewer depression symptoms. The greenness here, it does not refer to the mountains, the natural greenness. It refers to the urban greenness. That means the patch, within the urban area, instead of the mountains, or the natural environment. The second one is social activity mediate the relationship between the number of commercial facility and depression symptoms within 200 meter buffer. The third one is neighborhood urban greenness and the number of commercial facility had indirect association with on depressive symptoms within 500 meter buffer, which are mediated by functional ability. So there may be confusion, right? Because the findings are quite how to say comprehensive. So it is really difficult to summarize it, in a PowerPoint. So as I suggest, read the article, you will get the whole picture. So this is just the basic summary. So regarding the enabling process as well as the compensatory process, so we found evidence to support the mediating effect of social activities for the association between built environment and depressive symptoms. Specifically, the number of commercial facilities within 200 square buffer was indirectly associated with fewer depressive symptoms through more social activity. This finding actually reinforced the existing literature. And about, regarding the compensatory process, we found that the functional ability was a significant mediator for association between built environment and depressive symptoms in 500 meter buffer. This is new, to the existing literature. So this is just a very brief kind of idea about this study. So basically, the conclusion is our finding has implications for the ecological model of aging. In fact, ecology or the environment, both 500 and 200 square environment has an impact, direct and indirect effects on depression. However, that relationship is mediated by the social activities as well as functional activity through the enabling and the compensatory process. So by doing so, actually, this one support a age-friendly community So if we have an environment that is more age-friendly, in fact, it will have more profound long-term effects on the mental wellness of older people. So this one is also kind of linked to the similar conclusion from our other study using the age-friendly city database. So let me stop here because of time. It is already 5:30. But as I said, I will put the paper on the chat so that you can download the paper. And the paper is quite comprehensive in terms of reviewing the literature as well as the theoretical framework that support our study, as well as reporting the finding of our study. So let me stop here. Thank you so much.